Welcome back, fellow misfits, lonely boys, sad girls. It's your host, the Irreverent Reverend, recording this the day before Father's Day. I have another podcast ready to go, but it feels auspicious that I would be given an opportunity to talk about Father's Day, and we'll see what else comes up. We're going to fly from the seat of our pants today, so strap yourselves in. Make sure you have something tasty, and we'll dive in. Amen. All women. All them. You see, my father passed in 2018 after being estranged from each other for years before that. We had a wood-burning stove growing up, and when I was just 15, my father was out cutting wood for that stove when a tree fell on him. In addition to all of the physical injuries he sustained, he also sustained a traumatic brain injury. And although he did recover physically, mentally, he was never quite the same. To look at him, though, not knowing, he would have looked just like a normal person, whatever that means. But the man who he was, the quiet, tender, silly man, was lost, and in his place was a confused, scared, and sometimes violent man. As a result of that accident, he had to be placed in different nursing homes and VA facilities, and it shattered our family. We ended up losing our house just as I was going off to college. So fortunately, I did have a place to be, but my mother and brother bounced around to different friends, staying where they could, until they eventually got settled. And the fact that I find myself playing at being a transitional nomad now, when I had that upheaval in my life at such a fundamentally important time, is not lost on me. But fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you butter the bread that day, I am aware enough to know of these triggers and patterns so I can start the process of resolving them, bringing them back to the light, working with them. Choose your own wording here. After my father passed, I carried a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of regret that I couldn't have done something differently. Maybe the most ironic part of it was, at that time, right before he passed, I was well into my own healing journey, although I certainly wouldn't have called it that then, but I was in therapy, and we were making progress with all of the dad stuff. And I was getting to the point where I was feeling ready to reach out to him, to reopen those lines of communication that he never closed. But lines of communication that had become confused. And then he died anyway. And I'll never forget the day I realized that no matter where he was, because at that time I certainly wasn't believing in heaven, I still bristled whenever someone said something about God. But I realized wherever he was, be it heaven or just some void somewhere, wherever he was, I had come to believe that that place could not contain any kind of energy related to grief or blame or guilt or resentment or regret or any of those quote-unquote bad, icky, low vibe feelings. And so if he was not existing in a place where those feelings were available, then I realized the only place those feelings were coming from was from me. And that I could choose to let them go at any point. And I have. And now that he's gone, my father and I have a much better relationship than we ever had when he was living. And when I say that to people, I often get looks of pity or those sad kind of awes. And it might be sad, sure. But for me, it's not. During the pandemic, when I really started to dive into all this wild, wonderful world of woo, I was reading a book about developing your intuition. If I can find it in my reading history, I'll link it somewhere. And one of the activities was to essentially assign your own meaning to the symbols that you're seeing, or choosing a symbol to mean something. Angel numbers, pennies heads up, that kind of thing. And every morning, a robin would come and visit while I was reading this book or drinking my tea or whatever. And I don't know why he would say this, but when I was a child, I just remember my dad pointing out robins and just saying robin redbreast, like declaring it. That memory echoed, and as I looked at that robin that day, I decided, all right, every time I see a robin, that will be an emissary for my dad. That will be a messenger for him. And now I get to see my dad every day in every robin that I see. And I'm so grateful for that. And look, I'm not going to be arrogant or naive enough to suggest that you take this as a sign to reach out to your father if you're estranged. I understand that we all have different experiences, and that the healing journey for one isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. And I don't mean to suggest victim blaming or anything like that. But I do want to remind you that you have a choice in the feelings and the thoughts you're having about the relationship with your father. If you're not speaking with your father, or any of your family for that matter, I believe you have a reason. And your reason is valid. And the Irreverent Reverend isn't here to tell you to betray yourself just out of a sense of filial piety. I've mentioned A Course in Miracles on this podcast a few different times. And it uses Christian terminology to discuss universal themes. It's a channeled work from the 70s, and it has been a fundamentally important piece of my healing journey. But I'll admit, those first, few hundred pages with all the God and Christ and Son of God terminology, it was like pushing a rock uphill to get through that. But at some point, I relaxed my resistance to that and began to see beyond the words, feel beyond their meanings, and settle into a very nice kind of peace with it all, understanding that it's just all words trying to describe something that predates words. Now I think the only regret I have is that I wasn't able to share A Course in Miracles with my dad, because he was a big guy in the church. He was a deacon at a Methodist or Presbyterian church. I'm not sure. Probably both. His faith was very important to him. And it was never something that I understood. So to find something that helps me understand my own connection with God, the Creator, etc., using words and symbols and language that he would understand, I just like to think we might have finally had a way to talk about the mystery. But it almost doesn't matter, because we are now both a part of that. And if your father or parent are no longer in this mortal realm of reality, then I just want to offer that knowingness to you, that they are always with you. Not in a pervy, watching you take a dump kind of way.
You.
But in a presence kind of way. And maybe you can begin to imagine their presence being with you every time you allow yourself the space to take a nice deep breath in through the nose and out through pursed lips. Breathing in through the nose, pulling that breath deep into the low belly, and slowly blowing it out. And I would offer you, dear listener, the same advice I got from that psychic development book. You can choose something in nature to represent those loved ones who have passed, or the people that you're no longer speaking with. Maybe it's an oak tree you pass every day as you're leaving for work. Maybe it's a button in a drawer that you can't seem to throw away. Maybe it's an old pair of socks given to you as a gift. Maybe it's a pin you found on the lapel of his favorite gray suit. You know me, friends, I'm all about easygoing, uncomplicated, unfussy, unstuffy spirituality. And so, go forward, my friends. May the rain wash away all worries, cares, and concerns. May your farmer's market finds be delectable and delightful. And may today's and every day's bird song be sweet and for you. Amen. All women, all them. My dad used to tell this story about when he was a kid, how he was cleaning motorcycle parts, and how you do that apparently is you clean them in gasoline in fuel. And so he was cleaning these parts, and this mangy looking dog wanders over. And before my dad can realize it, he sees the dog lapping up this gasoline. And after my dad shoos him away from it, the dog just starts running and running and running and running and running around in circles, on and on and on, almost like it's carving a groove into the ground where it's running. And eventually the dog just kind of flops over. He didn't die, my dad said. He just ran out of gas. That's the kind of man my dad was. Goofy. And for all the unpleasantness that I experienced after his accident, I'm grateful every time that I get to tap into that goofiness. I'm grateful every time I get to be goofy, because I feel like I'm tapping into his energy. This was supposed to be my post-credits funny gag, but it's making me more emotional than I thought it would, so I think we'll just end here. No burps, no farts. Happy Father's Day.